Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're running a little bit late today here on How to App on iOS. I'm Jade, and I'm going to be hanging out with you for the next, whatever. So let's get things started here. I hope everybody's well, and I hope you have stuck around, so thank you very much for that. Today we've got a very special guest on the show. So what we're going to do just to kick things off is play some music by this particular person. So let's get into that right now and enjoy. Oops. Technical issues.
Making the eyes with me. What surprises me is that I don't really want you to. Your shoulders are frozen, but you're an explosion. Your name isn't real, but I don't care for sand. Lighting the fuse might result in a bang with a bango. I bet that you look good on the dance floor. Don't know if you're looking for romance or don't know what you're looking for. I bet that you look good on the dance floor, dancing to electro pop like a robot from 1984. 1984. I wish you'd stop ignoring me because you're sending me to despair. Without a sound you're calling me, and I don't think it's very fair that your shoulders are frozen, but you're an explosion. Your name isn't real, but I don't care for sand. Lights in the fuse might result in a bang with a bango. I bet that you look good on the dance floor. Don't know if you're looking for romance or don't know what you're looking for. I bet that you look good on the dance floor, dancing to electro pop like a robot from 1984. Looking for romance or don't know what you're looking for. I bet that you look good on the dance floor, dancing to electro pop like a robot from 1984. 1984.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Oh, my camera's a little bit high. Let's adjust that a little bit. Show my disgusting room in the background. So, if you haven't guessed already by looking at the screen, we've got an awesome musician, teacher, musician of like a million instruments. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I came across this particular person. Same way I came across Pete Johns, actually, was seeking some help using my iOS device in GarageBand, and went trolling through YouTube, and what do you know? He is this crazy musician who is playing everything himself, all right, using an iPad, and just like so effortlessly. So it's great pleasure today to have the man of a million musical instruments today on the show. Welcome along, Dan Baker.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing
good.
Good
morning. Good morning, Australia.
And good evening over there where you are. So thank you, firstly, so much for coming on and doing this for me. It was pretty short notice. It was the start of the week, probably. So
it's the best thing is always short notice. The best gigs I ever sort of go to are the ones where I literally it's an hour and I have to sort of bolt my dinner and go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we had a panic here today, so we couldn't get Skype happening. We were like 4 minutes
No,
to
I think I
showtime?
couldn't get time now.
No, we just couldn't find each other. We're just lost in a sea of internet people.
Yeah, totally.
So I'll start off today by asking what I normally ask everybody who's going to come on the show.
Sure.
Opening question. Dan Baker, what does music mean to you?
Well, it's a funny one because I don't remember not being a musician. I started the violin when I was 6. My dad. I still remember. That's one of the only memories I have of my dad saying to me, "Oh, do you fancy playing a musical instrument like anything and any sort of leaning towards the violin?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that." And so I don't remember not playing anything or reading music. So music is kind of it's something I glazed over a lot at school with other subjects because I was just thinking music all the time. So maths and physics were what I did at school, but English class. I was just thinking about how I was going to play guitar, so I was looking out the window and. That sort of thing. But yeah, it is endemic in I can't remember not doing it, and I shall never stop doing it.
No, that's what we love to hear. To me, it's a language. It's the real language that we should be speaking to each other. We probably wouldn't have so much conflict if we spoke music.
Quite. Absolutely. Yeah, it's something. I did a lot of touring of Japan with a band I was in called the Baker Brothers. We went. This is sort of back in the sort of mid noughties. We did 8 tours of Japan. And you can play in sort of rural southern Japan, and you just play a chord or notes, and you are completely speaking the same language to people that they just everyone understands it and gets it and enjoys it. So it's pretty. I mean, the irony being that I learned to speak a little bit of Japanese, just so I could sort of have something to say on the microphone, kind of thing. But yeah, it is a universal language, that's for certain. So yeah.
So since you mentioned the Brothers Band, tell us a little bit about that, because I have all your music on my on Apple Music, and I was curious, like, is that your main band? Because I couldn't find any other kind of music that you had released.
Yeah, I mean the Baker Brothers band. I mean, it's the band still exists. My brother and I were the Bakers in it, and neither of us are in the band anymore. But it's still called the Baker Brothers.
Right. Okay.
It was a sort of a branding thing after a while. But basically, pre-2010, we were in that band. So we wrote 3 albums and did a couple of live albums and did had various sort of remixes done of our stuff. Some of it was we started making 7-inch singles in the sort of New Orleans kind of funk sound.
Yeah.
So it's quite metersy, but a little bit rockier, really. And so that was our first thing that we did as a band. And then everything sort of built from there. We did albums and went to Japan to promote those. I mean, I left the band in 2010 and my brother a year after. It was kind of that was after like 8 years. I think it's sort of run its course, really. And then new guys took over from us. But it was great fun, and I constantly sort of pinch myself over how far I managed to get with it, and I still get royalty checks. Suddenly something will land on the doorstep and open it up, and great,
thank you.
Something that we released in 2004 or something. But that was my main creative outlet. I mean, I still write music, but I do a lot of stuff that is, not lyric based. I'm not really a lyricist. Yep. I mean, I'm working on stuff at the moment. It's just a project for me, really.
Yeah, just a project amongst many.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally.
So what was the last album from the Baker Brothers that you played on?
It was an album called Avid Sounds.
Yeah, 2008.
And that was released. Yeah, that was on EMI in Japan. And then I did a one-man band album after that, because I went to Japan in 2011. In fact, it wasn't long after the Sendai earthquake.
Oh dear.
And I went with my one-man band kit. I do this sort of thing where I made a keyboard stand with all knee levers and stuff on it. So it's all electronic. So I play drums on the floor. And,
Oh, excellent. Yes.
and I did an album called the Monophonic Orchestra, and that was on JVC in Japan. And then I went and toured that. So that was pretty surreal, traveling to Japan on my own with homemade equipment, which if it was destroyed by the airline, that would have been the end of the tour,
I love it.
So it's kind of, and that was good fun. I mean, I still do the one-man band thing sometimes. If there's, a wedding or somebody's having a party in their house and they can't fit a band in there, I do that. But it's a labour of love, because I carry enough gear for 3 other people doing it.
So you're the drummer's drummer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
I'll ask you also. So my first album when I was young that I first received vinyl, and vinyl's making such a comeback, which is fantastic, was Kiss, Unmasked. And I find it interesting now that I look back, and I can't stand Kiss at all. But when I was young, I was really into them. Do you recall what your first album was, and are you still a fan of their music?
Well, my mum, who's only 18 years older than me, she was proper into her punk stuff in the late 70s when I was tiny, really. So she had Sex Pistols albums. She had a few Madness albums. She had Dance Craze. The Dance Craze, the soundtrack to that album, and that is the first record really I remember, and I've still got it. I've got the vinyl now, and I will never tire of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Ever. And as I've grown up, I've realised, when you're listening to a band like the Specials or Bad Manners or the Body Snatchers or Selector, any of those guys, the musicianship is it's beyond awesome. That live album, you listen to it years later as a full-on muso and realize how good it is. So that's one of the albums that we had. And I mean, my mum had a few records. My dad he doesn't really listen to rock and pop music, so he didn't really have any vinyl records. He used to just have BBC Radio 3, so it's classical music.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I did growing up with a violin. I played, a sort of classically trained musician. But that Dance Craze album for me, that is my number one from childhood, and I still listen to it now.
Well, I think
so. Yeah,
you mentioned Madness in there too, and it's. I have a feeling that they heavily influence you in your musical taste. Is that true? Would that be true? Or heavily,
probably. I mean, my mum's got 5 brothers, and all of them are musicians, including my mum's the second of 6 children, and her next brother down, the next youngest. He was a professional. Well, he is a professional guitarist, and his career began in the sort of 77, 78 in London. So I was heavily influenced by what he was doing. He used to play a lot of proper fast country and western stuff. In addition to, he did a lot of work with Roger Waters, and he played on Tubular Bells 2, doing the gig, the live Rebels 2 gig. My uncle was the number 1 guitar player on that record.
Holy yes word.
And he did a lot of stuff with a band in Germany called Westernhagen, which is like a massive stadium rock band. So his influence over me as a rock musician and a jazz musician it's without measure, really. He's the main influence really for me. And he was slightly incensed that I was kind of that I liked my sort of 70s disco. This is sort of late 90s, early 2000s when the whole Jamiroquai thing was around and the whole acid jazz thing was there. Yeah. But I grew up listening to B.B. King and James Brown and Albert King, Freddie King, all of those guys, while my mates at school were listening to Led Zeppelin, because there was a massive, that sort of Led Zeppelin revival of the sort of late 80s and early 90s, and then the sort of Gary Moore sort of blues rock thing. And I was there going, wow, I feel good. I was listening to Otis Redding. But I mean, just going back to my favourite records growing up, a real favourite for me, along with Dance Craze, was the Ace of Clubs recording, Decca, of Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. And Django Reinhardt is probably my number one musical hero, I would say. I play in a gypsy jazz band. I play violin, like the sort of Stefan Grappelli sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Django Reinhardt, for me, just overcoming the horrendous injury that he had, losing two fingers in a caravan fire, and just going, well, let's keep going. Just
keep push on, yeah.
Yeah, and he was still the best sort of gypsy jazz guitarist that ever lived with two fingers, you know. Yeah, it's just outstanding. And I mean, I play gypsy jazz on a Fender Stratocaster because, you know, you get the purists who say, oh no, you've got to have a, you know, the Macaferri or the Selma or whatever guitar that Django Reinhardt had. But if he was alive now, he'd be playing a Telecaster.
Yeah, of course.
You know, or you know, Gibson 335 or a Les Paul or whatever it is. And so his that album, and I've still got that one as well. I mean, it's kind of chalk and cheese, really, with the specials and
yeah, definitely
Django Reinhardt. I mean, that's pretty much, you know, opposite ends of the scale. But yeah, I was just interested from day one, really.
I find some of the most interesting musicians do have quite a broad musical taste. I mean, anybody who's just listening to what they're doing themselves, for some reason, don't click with me as musicians. And it probably because I like anything from like John Zorn to, you know, Björk to death metal, total grindcore.
Totally.
Yeah, variety's the spice.
It is. It's really important. And I mean, I did experience a bit of a narrowing of my musical taste when I was a kid, and it was hard because obviously there was no internet and no, you know, you could swap records with people at school, but the internet, the sense of discovery, with you know, just being able to go onto YouTube and type something in. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, if I buy a lot of vinyl, I buy mostly Afrobeat, West African sort of, you know, 70s Lagos, that sort of thing. I mean, just listening to that stuff, you know, it's, and you know, stuff like the Analog Africa label and Soundway, those sort of labels are just, and Soul Jazz Records. I mean, it's not just soul jazz. It's great. You can get, you know, the invasive dance sound of Cameroon, 1974 to 81 or whatever. And I just went, oh, I like the sound of that. And we've got a local vinyl store, which is really, the guy in there is really good. He'll get everything in. He'll get like sort of new metal bands, and he'll get in soul music, and he'll get in repressings of Miles Davis or anything. Really, but it's a huge melting pot.
It's getting harder to classify music. I mean, even like I listen to a lot of metal, and it's branching off into so many different variations of metal. I wish Apple would just allow in their, when you upload music to their stores to sell, I wish they would just add one category, unclassifiable. I think that would do so many artists who I feel lost sometimes, like I have nowhere to go because of my varied styles and influences.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think you could do it in the old iTunes as it was years ago. Yeah. You could put unclassifiable in the. I
used it all the time. Your own stuff. Nearly all my stuff in my iTunes is unclassifiable.
Totally. But that's important. You know, it is important to have stuff that doesn't fit a genre, and you know, lots of the stuff like that. The tune you just played, I love that band, Arctic Monkeys, and I like the way they exploded onto the scene, you know, using social media, using MySpace as it was, to properly hype up their record. And I've always liked that tune. But something that I always try and do is to just is take a tune and just keep the top line, and that's it. Nothing else. Everything else underneath is different. I did on my lockdown tunes. I did the Ace of Spades for day 8 or 9. I can't remember
I remember
which day
it.
it was. But it was just this sort of Latin thing with my shovel bass that I play, just to try and just. I mean, I was expecting mountains of dislikes on that.
No way.
Video, but it was all like, and I thought, oh, come on, where are you, internet trolls? Come on, wake up.
Man, I shared that across my Facebook, my Twitter,
Oh,
because
no.
I have so many Motorhead fans, you know, so as friends. So, and everybody loved it. God, I had that was awesome. No, but see, you're preaching to somebody who loves songs being taken from over here and then shoved into a hole over here. I love that kind of stuff because, you know, normal boring covers. I mean, if I'm going to listen to that song, I might as well go buy that album if it's the same thing, you know?
Well, it's weird, isn't it, with things like the tribute bands? I mean, I've done a couple of tribute. I played in a Prince tribute band, which was great fun. Princeless, we were called. Nice. I mean, this was before he died. I mean, when he died, it was actually really hard to do the gigs because it was all tongue in cheek, and you know, it was really quite hard to do that. But it was great fun trying to get the original sounds of his. That was really good fun. But we didn't take it too seriously, you know, like exact bass line or exact this or. So, you know, I put on my sort of salmon pink tennis top and a pair of. I went into a charity shop and this old lady behind the counter. I said, look, this is going to sound a bit weird, but I'm doing this Prince gig, and I said, I don't know what size I am, and she just sort of looked at me and she just completely deadpan. She was quite up for helping me out. She said, yeah, you're about a 14, 16. And then she was sort of thumbing through clothes and giving me stuff to try on.
That's hard.
And it was absolutely brilliant. I had such a nice time, and she had a smile on her face when I left the shop, all kitted out, ready for my gig.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Excellent. But it's music is never boring. I think if it does get boring, it is because of things like just copying to the letter. And I mean, I love B.B. King's guitar sound, and I'd love to be able to get that tone. But I think, well, actually, it doesn't matter. This is what it is what it is. Yeah,
exactly. So what was it that drove you to learn so many freaking instruments? And is what time period as well has it taken you to muster all these instruments together and be so competent on them?
Well, actually, it was I went to private school for secondary education on a music scholarship. My parents, I mean, they had this plan to send me to this particular place, and it was great. I loved it there. It was a boarding school, but I was a day pupil because we lived right next to the school. So I had the best of both worlds. And the director of music there worked out that I wasn't going to be a concert violinist because I was a good violinist when I was at school. I could have taken it further and gone and done music college. I mean, I've returned to the violin after really 20 years of not playing it much. And he recognized this and he said, look, this isn't, you know, usually in the sixth form, you do a concerto with the orchestra. So you play the violin piece, you do Mendelssohn violin concerto or whatever it is. And he said we need a bass player for the concert band. And I said, I can't play the bass. And he said, well, you've got to earn your music scholarship. So there's a bass over there. Go away and learn that. And I still see him in the street and he's 80, just gone 80 now. And I thank him every time I see him for making me do what I do, because for me, it's turned into, you know, now I'm in my mid 40s. It's turned into this thing where it's got to be all about income streams. Rather than all my eggs in one basket sort of thing. And actually, I love it. I love doing it because it keeps the interest up. But so bass, I started learning when I was 15, and guitar at 16. And then I had violin. I had basic piano skills when I was a scholar. So violin was my main thing. I had a bit of piano. But piano, when I went to university to do electronic engineering, which was what I didn't do any music course. So I did electronics because I wanted to have something to fall back on. Actually, also because at one point I was seriously considering going to Australia, and of course
that would have been our gain.
And because things like the sciences are really important and all that. And my first job, when I went to university, I lived with a jazz pianist, and I just basically I thought, I love this. I've got to do this. I've got to work. I've got to learn all my modes, the chords, all this. So, my fridge in my room had all the modes on it, like magnetic modes, chord types, all of that.
Yep.
And then other things like I've got a banjo here, which actually you can scrub that bit out, can't you?
I'll go back and edit.
Yeah, absolutely. Go back and just reproduce it with a reverb. But it's all the guitar and the bass thing I started when I was a teenager, but I play a bit of pedal steel guitar as well. I bought that when I was, I don't know, 30, I suppose. And it's something that I use sort of for effects and in the studio. I'm not a solo pedal steel player, but I know where my chords are. So I am self-taught in guitar and bass, but not violin and piano is where I received my formal education. And things like the music theory really did help me find my way around a guitar, really, or a bass as it was at the time. I played in the concert band. It was just loads of brass players, a drummer, and a bass player. And they were good times. We went to Norway and Germany on tour and stuff with the school. It was great.
Yeah.
And, I was the one who had to carry this sort of 1x15 cabinet, out of the coach. But it was a labour of love, and it always will be.
Always the drummer's drummer.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah, we did the same thing at school. I went for my year 12. We had an amazing music course where for the whole year you got split into 3 bands, and you learnt 100 songs. And by halfway through the year, each Friday we were playing at other people's high schools, and we had school kids ripping our hair and getting us to sign things. We were like in a rock band in year 12. It was. And it cost me $500, I think, for that term, that whole year of schooling. You don't get that kind of value,
You don't. No, absolutely not. I mean, I occasionally do lectures in music colleges, sort of sixth form college, like sort of what was it, HNC? Is it you do when you're 18?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. But it's like it's a college for 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and they're all there wanting to pursue a career in the music business, but the competition is rife. I mean, I live in the middle of Dorset, which is a county really halfway along the coast between London and Cornwall.
Yep.
London and the far southwest tip. I live pretty much near the south coast, and the town I live in's 8,000 people. It's a tiny little place.
I only know Cornwall from the goodies.
Yeah. I'm about 3 hours from Cornwall.
All right, cool.
But I mean, I've got mates in London who they can't, they simply cannot get work.
Yeah.
And it's awful because everybody who's a musician, who's a pro musician, has got so much to offer. And actually, where I am in the middle of nowhere, it's brilliant because there's enough gigs. Certainly, I mean, Bournemouth, town on the south coast, that's kind of 200,000 people live there in the conurbation. So actually, I'm only half an hour from there. Right, I'm right in the countryside, but I can go and do my gigs there. And there's a really good sort of subculture, a really small sort of, not a clique, but everybody knows everybody in the music game around my. And it's always good fun. I like depping, actually. Playing depping is my favourite pastime with gigs. Somebody says, we need here's the list of tunes and keys. And I go, right, okay, great, right, I'll see you on Friday or whatever. Turn up and we just have a really great time. And then I get another gig with that band and it's still fun. So I play in about 20 bands, really, on and off. And it ranges from the Django Reinhardt sort of thing. to a rock band. We play AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Cooler Shaker, we play lots of different stuff. And I'll never say no to a gig. I've never said no to a gig. I know lots of people who have, who've said, "Oh, it's not really my thing." And I think, well, do you know what? If somebody phoned me up and said, it's I don't know, a System of a Down tribute band. I mean, to be honest, if somebody said that to me now, I would go,
yeah, do it.
I'd have to get rid of the flat cap, but
hey, you only live once,
Yeah,
my motto is
you do.
try everything 3 times. In case you don't like it the first time, you do it wrong the second time. By the third time, you'll know for sure.
Totally, because I'd come away from a System of a Down tribute band gig. I'd come away a better musician than I went in.
Yep.
And it's just using your ears and going, oh no, and you get to the end of the gig and you're driving home with your eyeballs sort of wide open because of the adrenaline of, oh, it's great. And 2 o'clock in the morning coming home, if it's been a good gig, it's even when you get, I drive a white van, so I'm stopped all the time.
I've seen that van.
But yeah. But they're always nice as pie when they stop you, and because I've had such a nice time, they kind of think, okay, have you had a drink, sir? No, I've just come out. And as soon as they find out you're a musician, actually, they've always been, "My ego, sir."
Yep.
Good night. And they know what they're looking for anyway. But I always come home and I always sit for an hour at home. Further hour before going to bed, because there's no way I can go to bed after something like that.
Yeah.
And I'll stick, I don't know, Inner Visions or something on just to chill out to, or a bit of
Enya.
I've got yeah. I I even stick on a Coltrane album, even though it's frantic and mathematical and awesome. It's still something to just switch off to.
Yep.
Sometimes, especially if the gig's been like a rock gig and you come home and put a jazz record on, or or you stick Led Zeppelin on if you've just come back from a jazz gig. Changing genres is sometimes a very good way of just switching off.
Yeah, definitely.
So all fun.
So I was going to ask you how you started in YouTube, but look, it's pretty much the same way for everybody. Instead, I'm going to skip over that question because I want to know how you managed your time during your recent set of videos for the Song a Day self-isolation videos. Because every day you released a full track with you playing every instrument, a video with all your shots. How the hell did you do that?
Well, recording time was limited to 2 hours. I limited my total recording time for the audio for 2 hours, and I just set a camera for every take. And there were usually it would be the first 20 minutes would be and then after, and it's the same. It's the same with doing any job. I wire up studios where I'm doing cables and stuff, and the first 8 channels take ages, and then everything just goes and falls into place. And that's kind of how this worked. So I did on day 50, I did a version of Elgar's Nimrod from the Enigma Variations, which took me a while. There were 30 string parts on that tune. So that took me, I did that over a few days in addition to my other lockdown tunes. So some of my lockdown tunes just before that were just piano, for example, so that I could divert more time. But the video editing usually is quite quick, about 25 minutes, half an hour. And then, but sometimes, and I always did them in the afternoon. I've got 2 small children because of the whole COVID thing. They've been at home homeschooling. My wife's been furloughed from work, so she was able to help with the kids in the morning, and then in the afternoon I would be there in the morning, and I'd have my laptop open just writing string parts or vocal parts or whatever for going into the studio later to do stuff, and I'd sit at the piano and try and work out some, but it was always in flux. So some of the tunes I'd think, I'm just change the arrangement at the last minute and then just scrub out the parts accordingly. Some tunes I had a vague plan. others, it just sort of took shape, and I thought, I'll add this, or I won't do that. So, I mean, things like the backing vocals for the 4-part harmonies, I'd record 3 parts per harmony part, so I end up with 12. So I would video the last take of each group. So I'd record most of the backing vocals, I'd record 9 parts, and then for each of the final harmonies, I'd video that.
Wow.
Because I was sort of warmed up and ready to go with it. And also that means that I could get, if there were gaps, like 8 bars between the intro and the chorus, I could just scrub over that. So I was able to work quickly and get through that. So, I mean, some tunes, I mean, just solo piano and violin would be, half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever. Things like, I mean, if you listen sort of pretty in depth with some of those tunes, you can hear that the drums aren't exactly, I haven't spent a long time on the drum programming, really. I played drums on one of them. And I'm not really a drummer, I can keep a beat, but it's, it's an effort. If there's any fills involved or any specific things, that's kind of,
that's what GarageBand's for.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah. And I did Don't You Want Me from the Human League using the fantastic sounds. I'm GarageBand wise, I started my YouTube in earnest when a friend of mine lent me her iPad Pro. Right. This was back in 2017 with GarageBand on it. And I've got an old iPad 2 with the original GarageBand 8-track recording with reverb and echo.
It was horrible.
Yeah, it was like the Porter studio of the modern sort of, but and I got into YouTube doing that. And I mean, I know that you were not going to ask the question about the YouTube, but actually I got the idea of doing it I got the inspiration from a guy called Simon Smith, who is an expert on black metal.
Nice.
That is his thing. But he's a guitarist who can turn up at any gig. If you say it's a jazz gig, he'll turn up with an ES-175 or whatever. He's got some quite nice guitars, and he'll play Joe Pass, and then he'll play, or he's got an Ibanez with a classic handle in the body.
Old school.
So, and he's got a Strat and a telly and all this. But he said, this is great. It pays the mortgage. And I went, pardon? And so I've got to the stage where it is actually making a monthly fee. It's not much, but it's a serious income stream for me now. So I'm trying to grow it. I'm not very good with the whole Google sort of analytics and tags and meta tag. I've got to get somebody to look after that for me. Yep. I've got to find somebody who's really good with that. But but GarageBand for iOS, as it was iOS 10 then, really launched my YouTube. I thought I can demo this, and actually it's my most successful video to date. I've got 430,000 hits, I think, on that. So it's growing. And then I've done about 80 other GarageBand videos, and that's how I discovered Pete Johns as well, and we've become friends online and with Steve Mara. It's great. The world is the world is a small place, but a beautiful place, because we've all got the same sort of channeled energy into making use of this fantastic free app. I mean, lots of people say to me, "Stop praising Apple, stop." Yeah. Da, da, da. I just say, well, credit where credit's due. Sure. Of course, it's a great advert for Logic Pro X, because Logic Pro X looks the same as GarageBand on the desktop, and that's. All of my tunes in lockdown really were done on Logic Pro X, but I used GarageBand for some of the files, most notably the drum machines, especially iOS Drummer. That particular part of it, I use the hi-hats on that exclusive. I take the bass drum and the snare drum away and program my own kick and snare. And sometimes I leave the fills if I want a few toms or something, but it's still... I still like to have control over it, but the hi-hat playing on it, when you got somebody playing hi-hats and it's kind of, that takes ages to program. and you're just thinking, Christ, I can't, and then it sounds awful. But iOS drummer, you just take the kick and the snare away, and you press the play button.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then it just goes, there you are. That's Apple. It's Apple to a T. They go, well, try this.
Your meal is served.
Try this. It's absolutely brilliant. And I like the, even though I'm a violinist and I'm a quite traditional with my string recording, whoever designed the strings on that whoever designed GarageBand for iOS in general is worthy of the medal, the top honor of that country. Not only because of how good it is, but because I've got young children. Well, as it was, my younger daughter Pearl, when she was 5, I've sat her down with an iPad and she worked out how to use it. And she was saying, "What does CM mean, Daddy?" C minor. And so she's already dabbling in the terminology and already talking about things. Oh, what's this? Oh, jab this. And then we got an acoustic piano in the house and she worked out how to play the tune on that just by using GarageBand. And I just thought, well, it's so magical in so many ways. And I particularly like the fact that I managed to record 32 tracks of audio on an iPhone SE with effects and plugins. And the whole idea of that day was to see if I could kill my phone, see if I could make it stop working. And it had 93% battery at the beginning of the day. And at the end of the day, it had 32% at the end of the session.
Wow.
So a battery the size of, a boiled sweet threw a gigabyte of data around itself, and then I just played it back and thought, well, what's and I had a little Zoom IQ6 plugged into the bottom of it as well. I've done recordings of it just using the internal mic, and actually I like that because you don't know what it's going to sound like on playback.
Yep.
So I'm going back. I've got an 8-channel Fostex reel-to-reel machine up here. So it's going back to those days of recording something and then thinking, what's it going to sound like off a bit of tape?
Yeah.
Because it sure as hell ain't going to sound like when it went on. It might be a sound that you think, great, crunchy. And the GarageBand mic for me is its limitations are its friend, really.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the time. So and it's free.
Yeah. When I first bought it, you had to pay for it. I think it was $6.99, and then it went free in the early version. Now I know you've played on Pete John's music before, as well.
I have.
And just speaking of the microphone, I just played drums on his new EP. But just as a guide for, like, he sent me one of the tracks. I did some backing vocals on my bed with my iPad Pro in my hand. And I got all these fancy mics around me and everything, and I just did these harmonies, sent them to Pete, like saying, delete these. These are just an idea I had. He ended up keeping them on the EP. Yeah. Like, that's how good that microphone is, People unaware. I'll just say, look, there's a few people in the chat I'll say hello to. Benedict Stewart is here. Tom, Stephen Ewart, Six String Gunner, SM Borthwick. Who else is here? Russ. I think Pete Johns is here as well. So
hello, Pete.
Thank you all for being here in the chat. And I think, look, Pete's thrown a question up. You answered pretty much all of my next question anyway with all that GarageBand stuff. So Pete asked, Dan mentioned managing multiple revenue streams. How do you handle the admin of this and not let it get in the way of creating? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. But the admin of things like my YouTube and do you mean that?
That's what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's my channel. I mean, and well done. And he's just gone over 50,000 subs as well, and that's fantastic. That's so great, and he must be absolutely stoked. But he's earned those subscribers.
Yeah, he works like a dog.
They don't come. They don't come by accident. And I've just gone over 20,000, and I'm sort of. I've been told by a few people to not try and do lots of different things. But that's who I am. That's what I want to be. But in terms of admin, I mean, I must admit, I do get back to people who comment on my videos, but sometimes I'll go for like 2 or 3 weeks of making videos and then realize that I've got to sit for an hour and reply. But actually, I like replying. I just like the community of it. But yeah, revenue streams. It's a tricky one. Some of them are obviously direct, like you go and do a gig and you get your £100 or £150 or whatever it is. And then a bit of school teaching, one-to-one teaching, where the parents will pay me direct into my bank account. I've got my I do music for libraries. So, and I mean, for example, my violin player, I'm playing on the new film adaptation of Blithe Spirit, the new Judi Dench film. I'm playing violin on that movie.
Wow, congratulations.
Not actually on the movie as a film, but I'm on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
And that was a few friends of mine who had the job to do between them. And I got a call from both of them, and I just thought, this is great. And I mean, it's for a session fee, but I'll get the PPL from that. The rights, and it's also that I'm on the soundtrack as well, which is nice. That will end up delivering some money, but it's
all about those royalties.
Yeah, it is, and I'm still getting royalties from the Baker Brothers in Japan.
Yep.
I'll just sort of find there's an amount that sort of ends up in my, and I think, where did that come from? Thinking it's like, I don't know, I've got a refund on my electricity bill or something. And it's just a load of numbers as a reference. And then a few days later, the bank sort of resolves onto their system where the payment has come from. I used to be a gravedigger's assistant when I was first doing gigs and first being a professional musician. So I used to fill in the hole after everyone had left the churchyard. And it was, 30 or 40 pounds, which would, go in the, I'd buy fuel to go and do the gigs, or get sets of strings or whatever. And this is kind of when I was, renting, living at home, or whatever it was. But it's taken a while to settle down, and the admin, I do have to give kind of a morning a week, just tying up loose ends, really. Just to making sure that the machine, the badly oiled, haphazard machine, this Dan Baker musician, keeps going, really. I'm lucky that I'm never ill.
I had to hold back there when you said about being a grave digger.
Yeah.
I just thought of that Young Ones episode and went, do you dig graves? Yes.
Well, I never did the digging. I would only do the filling in, because a mechanical digger would get all the soil out, and then I'd have to fill it back in and try and hide the soil that was left, because you can't obviously dump it anywhere. So you do a sort of Great Escape with trousers full of local soil, just to try and get rid of it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll finish off with my last question that I kind of ask everybody that I've stolen kind of from Pete.
Yeah.
When do you think is the best time for somebody to start creating music, and how?
Well, this is, I dine out on a story, and I'll be very brief with this.
Go for it.
I'm a music examiner as well. I have to put a suit and a tie on, and I listen to everyone from. I'd work for the ABRSM in the UK, so which is Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music. So you have all the classical grades from grades 1 to 8, and I basically examine all instruments. It's all about examining musical outcome and all that sort of thing. And on the list of names, I saw Marjorie somebody, and I went, okay, most of them are kids, and I thought, if that's a child, that's progressive parenting, or named after great-great-grandma or whatever. And in walked this lady of 75 to do a fairly low-grade cello, and I thought, she came in and she goes, hello, dear, and sat down, and I thought, this could go either way. This really could go either way. And I had to have a chat with myself afterwards. She was the last one before the lunch break, and I had to have a chat with myself. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, "Don't you dare judge a book by its cover ever again." Because she basically pretty much got top marks. And I got chatting to her, and she said, because the adult candidate's always trying to engage you in conversation, and she said, I took the cello up when I was 70, and I just thought, this is getting better and better and better and better. She had not touched a musical instrument for her first 8 decades on planet Earth.
Oh my God.
She had simply not touched a musical instrument. She'd listening to Jacqueline Dupre and records and listening to classical music her entire life. And she came in with a few years experience. I think she was 73 or something like that. She'd been playing for 3 or 4 years. And she said, I took it up when I retired. And I felt myself sort of slightly emotional, thinking that I've met somebody who has had no musical sort of experience at all, who has come in and played like that.
Yeah.
You don't expect vibrato on a string instrument like a cello or a violin. You don't expect that till grade 5 or 6, and she was fully there with it at grade 3.
Yeah.
And I dine out on that. I tell everyone that story if they say, "Oh, I'm too old to do music," or I wish I'd done this when I was younger." Learning a foreign language, yes, perhaps. Yeah. Music, no, because we're all brought up with it. As you said at the beginning of the interview, you said this is the universal language, and it's in all of us, whether we're musicians or not. And I think sometimes the step of getting into practical musicianship is something that people are scared of, because they think, "Oh, what happens if I'm no good?" And actually, very often they find that actually, I'm really enjoying this, playing piano and playing the cello or oboe or bass guitar or whatever it is. And it's a story that I will never, and I experienced that firsthand. And I came away from that day, I had a serious spring in my step, just thinking, and I was so glad that I wanted to. You have to put an additional comment at the bottom of the form if they're a distinction candidate, or indeed if they fail, and you have to sort of qualify that and all that. But I wanted to put, I've driven all this way. I've driven 250 miles for like a 4-day exam session, and I wanted to say I've driven all this way to hear you, because actually I had.
Wow.
I'd driven all of that way, not knowing that she was going to be there, and she just played her socks off. She played like there was nobody in the room, and the accompanist had a smile on her face, and it was fab. It was great. So for anyone starting out, it doesn't matter how old you are, as long as your fingers kind of still work. But even then, music appreciation and being able to produce something, or being able to learn the music theory. My grandmother, she knew loads of music theory, but couldn't really play anything, which was, I've not met many people like that, but she was able to appreciate and do a bit of composing herself. And she couldn't really play she played a tiny bit of piano, but wasn't really proficient enough to realize her own compositions. But it's a language, and it's an incredible one. It's great fun, and I just as I say, retirement is not on the cards for me. Partly because I haven't got a pension, mind you. Who's got a pension nowadays? So I'll be playing, But I've done gigs with people in their 80s who turn up with a keyboard and a pair of speakers, and they've got their diary open for next year, and when they'll be 81 or 82 or whatever. And it's something that I think I will carry on doing, although I shan't be carrying a 4x10 bass cabinet around like I do at the moment, because it's getting a bit heavy. No.
Technology will change so much by then. It'll be this size. You'll be able to stick it in your ear and carry it around that way.
Well, yeah. I used to have a Fender Rhodes 88 suitcase, the full-on suitcase piano, and the other week I went out with iOS. I went out with my phone. I just plugged my phone into the PA via a pair of DR boxes for the stereo, left and right, and just lightning ported the keyboard up to my phone, and just put a little bit of compression on, just so that it would be a bit sort of gig ready. And people go, I love the Rhodes. And I just hold my phone. And most people can't believe it when you do this, when the GarageBand comes on. And actually, that's the reason why other companies, other mobile phone companies or other manufacturers of tablets haven't even bothered.
Yeah.
Because they're probably just there going, we can't compete with that.
It's impossible.
We can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the good thing about GarageBand is the workarounds that you can employ. Things like the AU plugins, the audio unit extensions, they are an untapped resource in a lot of people's minds. Yeah, lots of people like the pictures, but if you want a delay that isn't related to the tempo that you're working with, that's where you go.
Yeah.
You just go to somewhere like that, and it's, it's absolutely brilliant. I go into a school with it and record and show kids how to record, and then they go, Mom, Dad, Mom, go, and they sort of confiscate their parents' iPhone and then come up with something. And I've heard a few kids like recordings of the start, and I just think, this is what it's about. And its educational value is, I think Apple did it obviously as a good gimmick for their phone, and also a good advert for Logic Pro X, which is cheap. It's only £200. I paid £700 back in 2003 for my first version of Logic Pro 7. But it's a good advert, but it's also great in itself. And there are people who don't have Logic Pro X who do a perfectly good recording, as you said. Yeah, people are with your backing vocals.
Yep.
I mean, the mic offers some compression of its own.
Yeah.
And as long as it's not heavily compressed, we get lots of noise from the mic, it's fine. It's all good.
And sometimes that noise makes it even better. Like,
yeah, totally. I mean, you can buy a plugin. Yeah, I mean, you can buy a plugin that emulates. I mean, I've got. Don't know if you can see on the camera up there. I've got a 1970 Revox. I've got a Revox A77 recorder, and it's. I did a reggae album a few years ago for a library company. Reggae. I mean, I love proper dub reggae, and I did an album for them. And and I sent it to them. I'd done it all on computer, and they said, "Oh yeah, Graham, yeah, it's fine. I mean, we need it to sound a bit more authentic." And I went, "Oh, okay then." And I just made the VU meters on my tape deck go. And occasionally they flick off the top and then go back again. And I sent it to the library company. I mean, this is a bit 1/4-inch tape with, and they went, "Yeah, that's it." And I went, "Oh, great, okay."
I love that.
So it's like this retrograde step from all of this marvelous computer technology, and then I go and stick it through one of those. Yeah. And I'm in the process of restoring it as well. I've got new capacitors, new components and stuff for it, and I'm nearly there. It sounds great. And I do warm up a mix on it sometimes, but it is a bit different from the plugins. All the tape machine plugins that you get now are usually synthesizing proper full-on pro decks from the 70s, like 1-inch 2-track, for example. But there's a great company, if you're looking for plugins, there's a great company called Audio Thing, and they gave me a plugin because I tested one for them, and they liked what I'd done, and they said, "Oh, please have a plugin from us to test." And it was one called Reels, which simulates like a proper home reel-to-reel deck from the 70s, and it's wicked. It's really good, and it's nice. I like playing upright piano sounds rather than just the generic grand piano that you get. And I think an upright piano is so it just seems a bit more earthy and a bit more real because of the imperfections involved with it.
Yeah.
But it is. We just use the tools to create, and creativity has always got to be the heart of it, rather than worrying about what plugins you use or what Joe Bloggs has got down the road. This competition to have an amplifier that's got particular speakers in it. I mean, I've got an AC30 right next to me here. It's a new AC30. That's one of the Chinese-made ones. It sounds great. I mean, it's not going to be a JMI from 1965 or whatever. It's not going to be that. but it's not a million miles away, and it's far more reliable, and it's not something you're scared to scratch at a gig.
Yeah.
You know.
And who's going to know anyway? Like these musical snobs who sit there and go, "Oh, but you didn't use this, then you didn't use that." And I do find it funny that we're moving like away from all these old technologies to new technologies. Yet people are releasing so many apps that are recreating old technologies.
That's right.
You know, so it says a lot about the old technologies that we use to get where we are now.
It does. I mean, most people have got these sort of Apple headphones come free with everything. It's, you know, they're probably, you know, $1 or something to buy and cents to produce. I mean, even a pair of the AirPods are good. But people are listening to stuff on something that is so coloured with its sound, with its frequency response, that you can have the best monitors under the sun. You can be, you know, looking at your frequencies and making sure that your analyzer says, "Oh," but your ears are the ultimate judge of what your eyes see. And I mean, I still do that whole sort of late 80s, 90s thing of taking a mix to my car to listen to it. You have to, because that's what people listen to stuff on. That's probably, in fact, the irony being that a car stereo is probably the best fidelity of most people's stereo systems. People don't have hi-fi anymore. They've got a Sonos system or a pair of speakers in an iMac or a PC speakers or whatever it is. And I mean, half of them don't go below about, you know, 150, 120 hertz. So, you know, for when I've got a Fender Precision with tape wound strings on it, I boost the mid, because that's where a Precision should be. You know, it's all about that mid. The bass takes care of itself. The bass end, it's really warm at the bass. You don't need to go crank on, you know, at 50 hertz, because nobody's going to hear it. Sure, the kick drum's got to be accessible, but you put the mid range on it for the beater. So thereby solving that problem of people who are listening to stuff on an alarm clock or a Bluetooth speaker or whatever. But it's I mean, I still listen to records. I mean, I listen to the Nightfly, actually, Donald Fagen, on a pair of speakers. If I'm going to do anything elsewhere, I'll put that record on first. So I have it on my, you know, an iPod as like, and just put it through there. So it's just so I can get used to a pair of speakers and see what it is, you know, with something that I know really well. And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just so that you can gauge what's going on, you know, whether the top end is crisp or whether there's a lump or deficiencies or whatever. You just work with those. It's fine.
Find that happy medium that works across all of them.
Totally. Absolutely.
So the GHS 1962 in the chat has said, "I could listen to Dan all night. Such an interesting guy." And I totally agree. A very easy interview, because I knew when I was going to write questions out, I just thought, you know, I don't want this to be like that, because I know you're not going to be like that anyway. You're going to be more of a conversational person, so it's much easier to do that. So thank you for just being exactly what I thought you'd be like. Makes my life easy.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Excellent.
Russ says, Russ8889 says, "I suffered a stroke last year that disabled my right hand side, but I can still make music on my iPad. I just use piano roll for everything. You can't stop the music in you." Exactly.
One thing that's absolutely fantastic. And just related to that, I a couple of years ago I made a you know, those Korg Nano Key things that you can. I took one apart. I took the back cover off, and I basically drew the circuit diagram of this.
Of course you did.
And then I chopped it into. I made a one-handed, just for left hand. I made a one-handed bass fretboard by taking the keys and turning them through 90 degrees in groups of 3. So it's like a 3-string bass neck. And of course, because you touch the buttons, because they're touch sensitive, I managed to. In fact, I know exactly where it is.
Excellent.
I'll just grab it.
Hope everybody's enjoying the show. We're running a little bit longer than what I thought, but that's all good, because, man, look what we're getting right here. This is absolutely worth every minute of your time right now.
So it's just a standard M audio keyboard, but affixed to that
is a row of buttons.
Oh my God.
And if you look at the underside, it's still very much a prototype. It's bits of circuit board, and this shelf bracket I got from a furniture store.
Man.
In fact, I think it was lying about. And so that basically means that I can play a bass line here and do keyboards there. Because I was playing keyboards at a gig. I did quite a few gigs playing Hammond organ, actually. So I'd be playing the bass and the chords while we had it was a sax player and a drummer. So we were doing quite sort of funky, jazzy sort of stuff. But it was still in dodgy clubs where people were fighting and, you get a bottle thrown at you or whatever. And I decided that I want to be mobile so I can get out of anyone's way. If there's somebody who's like, if the bouncers are trying to restrain somebody who's basically doesn't know his own strength, kind of thing.
Quick exit.
I wanted to. So that was one of the reasons. But that fretboard, it's if you've got, if you have problems with one hand, and music is accessible regardless. Yeah. There was I think. I had a friend. He died eventually of a brain tumor, but he was able to accompany his child in an exam just with one hand because he's a great pianist. But he'd lost. There were, he'd lost one side of essentially one side, and he was just creating a piano part with one hand, and just doing things differently. And it's still music is music is music. It's going back to Django Reinhardt with two fingers. Playing, reinventing yourself, and just thinking, I have to carry on.
Yep.
Because this is what I love doing. And I've started with playing the bass. Sometimes at gigs, I get my hand locks up a bit, and I just thought, oh, okay, warning. I've got to do something about this. So I had to have a break from it for a little bit. And I haven't had the problem since, luckily. But, it always crosses my mind that what happens if one of my hands or a break or, something, I get run over or something happens. And the answer is I don't know, but I'd make a damn good attempt at just trying to carry on. There's no, giving up is not an option. And it's not an option for so many reasons, really, because music is about entertainment. It's about study. But music is related to every other subject at school: geography, history, maths, physics, English. It's related to every single one of those. Physical education, everything. So it's really important. But that one-handed bass neck, that was a great. I gigged with that for about 3 years.
That's incredible.
And I just and I put a USB hub thing inside it, because obviously I've got one USB keyboard and another one, and rather than send two leads to a hub, I built a hub into it, just chopped one up and cable tied it to the inside of the keyboard. And then I've got a 4-pin XLR connector in the bottom of it, and then just wired a USB cable up to that so it wouldn't pull out at a gig.
I love your brain, the way it works around music. Find a solution, rip things apart, and make things work for you. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, the shovel. My shovel bass is. I play a bit of double bass, but I haven't got room for it. And to find something playable, you've got to spend £3,000 or £4,000. And then you're sort of worried about the humidity and what if this and then you got to fold the back seats down. Or if it goes in the van, you've got to put your sleeping bags around it, or if you're lucky enough to have a case. And I just thought, well, I'm going to go to the local builders merchants, and I bought a shovel for £25 and a bit of wood from the joiners next door. I went in and told them what I was doing, and they sort of looked at each other and called security, and I had to sort of escape, make good my escape. But I played it. I used it in a show where I was a bass player in the pit band, and the director of music, it was My Fair Lady, and he was going, and And he glanced down at me and just looked at me as if it literally, and he's, what is that thing? And he said that he wouldn't have allowed me to play it if he'd seen it first, because I sort of smuggled it in. It wasn't a precision gig, it wasn't a Fender gig, really. It was kind of, dum, 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 but real sort of dull double bass, sort of pizzicato, sort of just plucking. And I just mount it on a mic stand, and I mean, it's quite short scale. It's only about 2 inches longer than a Telecaster, so it's much, much closer together. So that took a bit of getting used to, but it's great fun, And I made the amp to go with it, which is a wheelbarrow with a piece of plywood across the actual barrow with a 15-inch speaker and an old H&H bass amp. So the shovel and the wheelbarrow. So I've wheeled it to gigs. I've just walked down the road with the wheelbarrow with my bass on it, which means I can have a few beers as well and then not be drunk in charge of a wheelbarrow on the way home.
And you'd be perfect at those. I'm sure there's an Irish pub somewhere that's called Shovel and a Wheelbarrow. Perfect to play there.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to try and get a skiffle band together, like a modern day skiffle thing going, where you've got various instruments that are just homemade. I mean, I've got up here I'll just stand up on the shelf here.
We're getting it all today, folks.
I've got this, which is a frying pan.
God.
And what I've done is I've put a violin fingerboard and then a set of tuners the other end. I mean, this is all just made out of bits,
Holy
so it
shit.
just looks. And then an old lace sensor pickup that I used to have in my Strat, and 4 strings and there's the output jack on the side of the pan.
There's an
Basically,
output jack.
it had stopped cooking food properly. So all the food started sticking to the bottom of the pan. And I thought, well, it'll end up in the side of a hill somewhere, or it would become, Nissan Micras or something. So to save all that energy of recycling the metal, I thought, well, I'll just drill a few holes and see what happens. And it needs work, put it that way. It needs a little bit of...
bit more than a tune.
I've got to try and I think I don't know what sort of silly phase I was going through with that, but it's never it'll never stop. There's always something to do. I mean, people making a saxophone out of like a reed, a plant, and putting holes in it and then making a double reed and getting a pretty decent sound out of it. I mean, it reminds us that musical instruments are complete contrivances.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no such thing as a natural musical instrument. So, but it's, it's fun where, it is fun. It is a lot of fun.
This interview has been absolutely fun beyond my wildest dreams. I was a bit nervous before the start. You have made my day.
Fantastic.
It's almost 9:30 here in the morning, and I'm heading off for a little weekend away from music. Well, I'm still doing some music on my iPad. Look, we'll finish up the show. I'll let everybody know. If you want to find out more about Dan Baker, you can find him on YouTube at Dan Baker 74, I think it is. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So go over, you jump onto the link to his playlists. You'll find an absolute smattering of great stuff there. I'll just bring it up on my screen. I think I have it here. There we go. And I just want to thank you also, not only for this fantastic interview today, but recently I went through your series on music theory. Because I studied I went to school and studied a bit, but I really never followed through with it. But your videos on that, which you did a few months ago, were just super helpful, and you really broke it down on a very simple way, so virtually anybody could learn from that. So I suggest that series that you did was
fantastic. Oh, thank you.
Really helped a lot. I love your videos. I know. Look, everybody I speak to speaks so highly of you. You're such a creative and inventive musician. It's been an absolute honor to have you on my little small tiny show here. And
well, thank you for having me on. Thanks for having me. To talk. It's been a lot of fun, and it's nice to meet you and just to interact with somebody the other side of the planet that feels like the same room. And of course, with music, it is like we're in the same, we're in the same room.
We are. And look, everybody in the chat is saying they really enjoyed this so much. So you've just killed it today. And I do want to ask before we finish this, I would love to have you back on something a bit less formal, just picking your brain about some of the stuff you've been talking about making instruments, touring, tips and things like that. So sometime down the track, I would really love to have you on and just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Great. I'm sure, look, I've got heaps out of this today and everybody else here has. It's been extremely valuable. So thank you very much for your time today, Dan.
Oh, pleasure. And just let me know, just send me a message, and it's easy enough to come and switch the computer on, and then I'll be able to use Skype this time as well.
Hey, we got there without any hitches. So, except the start, I think I had a problem there. You had too much echo on your voice, and I had a button depressed, so it was my problem.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But we sorted that out within the first couple of minutes. So
cool.
Well,
nice.
Thank you very much. I hope you have what is it there? Thursday there, so you're a day away from the weekend. I hope you have a nice weekend.
Well, actually, we're musicians. Our job is not to know what day it is. I think, actually, I'm 23 minutes into Friday.
Oh, yeah, you are too.
If that makes any difference.
Well, happy Friday, Dan.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Great. You've been absolutely fantastic. And I hope, thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. And I'll see you all back Sunday for most people in the UK and the US. I'll be back for another week of shows about apps. And Monday, that'll be here in Australia. So everybody take care. Thank you very much for hanging out. And links for Dan's stuff is in the description as well. So
lovely.
Have a fantastic weekend and day ahead. Bye-bye, everyone. See you, Dan.
Nice. Cheers. Thanks very much.
And